So then I guess we can use that as our segue to shift into the film discussion portion of the show. So
Yes.
for anyone who is just tuning in for the first time, unfamiliar with how the show works, is I used to have a series on my YouTube channel where every month I would recommend a bunch of movies that I had watched lately, but that would get flagged for copyright all the time because I would show footage, and even though it's covered under fair use and all that fun stuff,
we love YouTube.
Yep, exactly. It wouldn't stop the claims. So I still want to do film discussion, so that's why we have this show. So every episode I recommend the guest a movie, the guest recommends me a movie, and we discuss. And as Gavin said earlier, the film that he recommended me was Weird Al's UHF. So tell us a little bit about this movie.
All right, so this was supposed to be. He claims that the studio built him up when this movie was in production and in post-production, that he was going to be like their next big star, that this movie was going to be the next big thing. And then it came out, and I want to say it opened opening weekend with a bunch of other big movies, huge movies, and it tanked at the box office.
Oh,
I mean, it was like, it just absolutely tanked, and they're like, okay, I guess we're not doing any more movies with you. And I mean, it was just, he was proud of the movie. They thought it was going to do well. It didn't do well. That company ended up going bankrupt later.
Oh, no.
So I mean, it was just hyped up to be this huge movie, and it absolutely tanked. But many years later, when it was released on like VHS and DVD, it gained a cult following. So it's known as a cult classic film because now it's very, very popular in a small niche of people. But basically, it's a movie about someone, he and his best friend keep getting fired from jobs, and they want to build out this UHF station, this ultra high frequency station, television station. And there's an evil person that's trying to take over their studio, who's part of a larger studio. He wants to take over their station when it starts to get popular, and it's a wild ride. But it was basically a plotline excuse for Weird Al to parody a bunch of other movies and TV shows, because, you know, you have that television format, so you can throw in commercials and really just kind of do some things that don't necessarily fit into the plot, but because it's a television
like
show.
Spatula World and all that.
Exactly, Spatula City. It's like that doesn't have a serious plot element, but it's a commercial because TV stations have commercials. So I mean, it's an excuse, really.
Exactly, yeah. And I like the little stuff like Conan the Librarian and the they do the thing where it's like when they find out they're number one in the ratings, and they do like that quick flash of like, here's all our programming and all that, and it's just like ridiculous game shows and like reality segments.
It's absolutely, I mean, it's off the walls absurd, which obviously maybe at the time people just weren't ready for it. People weren't in the mindset to watch that kind of film.
Where would this, because I'm not super familiar with Weird Al's career, but like, where does this fall in terms of like, because I know he was like pretty big in the in like the 80s and 90s and all that, but like, where does this fall in sort of his like rise to popularity?
So this was in 89. So 89, he had released a bunch of albums by then, so he was already very well known.
Like,
so it was kind of like,
and all that.
It was one of those things that says, well, you know, he's done all this, so now he should do a movie. So it's like, it was the next step in possibly his career, but it didn't take off. So I mean, he then went back to music because it was like, you know, obviously that's not going to take off. That's not going to work out. But so I'm just peeking up the Wikipedia page because I'm not a know-it-all.
No, it's okay. I'm actually doing the exact same thing. Don't worry.
It says that the failure of the film left him in a 3-year slump, which was later broken by his inspiration to compose "Smells Like Nirvana." So it was before the Off the Deep End album. So obviously, I mean, he was already had songs like "Eat It" and "Fat" and stuff like that. But then he did this, and it almost killed his career, but it didn't. So
thankfully, yeah.
Thankfully,
I know you mentioned earlier, because I think right above that it like lists everything. So this opened up against Indiana Jones: Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Batman,
Yeah.
When Harry met. So yeah, so this was.
I think he describes it as like the worst possible opening weekend slate ever. It's just like all these huge budget, big name movies, and then you have Weird Al in UHF, and it was just like, oh, this is a disaster.
But I mean, I think because some of my favorite movies of all time have a similar sort of story. Like The Thing is one of my favorite scary movies of all time, and that opened up, I want to say, either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after E.T., so that just killed it. But I'm that sort of is a trend I find with like that sooner or later, again, going back to that point of like there's an audience for everything. Sooner or later, the audience discovers it and it makes its big comeback one way or another. But
absolutely.
And I'm glad this one did, because this is a really funny movie, like one of those sort of I don't want to say classic comedies, but like definitely like one of those like sort of like late 80s, early 90s, like wacky off-kilter character comedies. But it is very unique.
You obviously don't go into it like expecting this like cinematic masterpiece. Like, don't go in with high expectations like that, and go in looking for a night of entertainment. That's what it is. It's just some mindless, just funny entertainment.
And yeah, it's very like I like too the because we mentioned like the little like cutaways with the TV station and all that. Like it does kind of take me out of it a little bit, but I do like how the sort of his like imagination sequences where like you parody like Rambo 2 and like the Raiders of the Lost Ark and all that. Like those are very, very funny. I had a professor in Kutztown. We took a comedy writing class, and I forget what the like what the context of him showing this to us was, but we watched the first half of it. I think as like talking about like it was sort of like with classic comedy, but also I wish I could remember what the lesson was, but he hyped it up and made it it made sense with that was a horrible non-story. Sorry about that. It was I remembered liking it a lot when I saw the first half of it. It kind of bums me out a little bit, because if you're Dr. McKeag, if you're listening to this, how dare you let us not finish this, but yet you did have us finish King Ralph. That was a little bit of a, I wouldn't have picked that. I wouldn't have picked that movie. But yeah, no, it's I did. I very much enjoyed it. I liked the sort of film parodies that we like open and end on, and like the smaller ones that are throughout. The rock, like Rolling Rock gag, I enjoyed so much. I think I replayed that sequence after it was done, because I just like he keeps on running past different matte paintings, and
it's just
so funny, so like stupid, but again like in the best possible way.
Yeah, it's stupid humor, and I love it for it. It's like you just gotta go and be like, that was so stupid that it was brilliant, you know?
Yeah. And like
it transcends stupid.
Exactly. Like the whole like there's like the moments with like the Twinkie hot dog thing and the
Twinkie wiener sandwich.
And when he makes the mountain out of the mashed potatoes, and he's like, this means something. It's just like, I don't know. There's just like beautiful little moments throughout that are just like, okay, that's like a product of its time for sure, but it's still I'm enjoying this a lot.
Oh yeah. The best thing is that at his live concerts, he does a bunch of costume changes in between songs and stuff. And so they play videos from his career on this huge screen. I mean, where it comes to like references in modern TV shows or cameos in movies, and then occasionally they'll play like a clip from UHF, and the entire audience is reciting it word for word. I mean, like the Wheel of Fish. I mean, they're just like, do you want to take the box? Do you want to take the red snapper? What's in the box? And everyone in the audience is screaming, the box, the box. It's ridiculous.
That's one other thing too I like about it, is that this is one of those movies where if you haven't seen it and then you sit down to watch it, you'll be like, oh, that's where that's from, because there's a lot of moments in this movie that I recognized as like being included in like different YouTube videos as like sort of cutaway jokes and stuff, like the "you're so stupid." Like that was one that I was like, oh, that's okay. I recognize that, but
that is one of my favorite quotes.
The meme quality of this movie is very
seriously,
is definitely there.
Yeah, maybe they need to do another movie like that, because it's the perfect time with all these everyone's short attention spans and stuff. They want those jarring cuts to different types of parodies.
Exactly.
It's the perfect time for UHF 2.
Exactly. It could be like he has to take over his own streaming service or something like that.
Although to be fair, he has said he will never ever make a UHF 2 just because he said people have so great memories of UHF, and UHF, everyone loves that, and he says a sequel is never as good, and it always taints the legacy of that film. So he's like, I would never try to follow up UHF with a sequel. He's like, I'll gladly make another movie, but it's never going to be UHF 2, because you don't want to mess with everyone's memories of a perfect movie.
Right. And I think it is a shame, but you have to kind of admire that sort of artistic integrity. And even just beyond that, Weird Al as a person, whenever he talks about I always ask the permission of the person I'm parodying if I can cover their song and all that, and if they the whole Paul McCartney thing where it's I forgot what the song was, but he's
Live and Let Die, a parody called Chicken Pot Pie.
Exactly. And Paul McCartney being I don't want it to be about eating meat, and Weird Al's okay, well then I won't do it, but that idea would have been really funny. But that just speaks to his artistic integrity as a person, so I can definitely admire something like that. But it's just UHF is again, it almost I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a spiritual successor if he ever does decide to make another movie, but it is definitely something that could only exist in '89, and I'm glad that it does. Yeah,
it's one of those crazy films that you just can't believe it got made, but somehow it did.
Right.
Thank God it did, because the world is a better place for it.
Mm-hmm. And I just it's definitely a comedy I think everyone should see. It is a shame that it didn't do well, but again, But
now it's done well. So
exactly, it's found its
audience.
Yeah, so it's just a fantastic movie. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. If you guys haven't seen the movie yet prior to listening, which shame on you, why would you do that? You can watch it for free on Vudu. That's how I watched it. You can also rent it on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Prime, and YouTube for $4. So. No excuse not to watch it. Definitely go check it out if you haven't seen it. It's
you came
really
prepared.
Funny.
You had all your statistics lined up.
I always that's one thing that I want to try and do is because I used to with that previous series my gauge was is it on Netflix, because that's just what most people tend to watch. But I was okay, well, I don't have Netflix, so I can't really use that as my gauge. So, but no, I always try and make sure people have as many options as they can.